Welcome to the Other, a place where the ordinary world ends and the darker truths begin. Tonight, we leave behind the comfort of city lights and step into the depths of the wilderness, into forests where the silence is heavy, the shadows stretch endlessly, and the trees hide stories that were never meant to be heard. These are 4 true forest horror stories. Real experiences from people who thought they were simply hiking, camping, or exploring, until something in the woods reminded them that they were not alone. Some saw figures watching them from between the trees. Some heard footsteps circling their tents in the dead of night. And some encountered things that no animal and no person could explain. These stories are not myths. They are moments of terror lived by real people, moments when nature itself seemed to shift. When every rustle felt intentional, when every snapped twig felt like a warning, and when the forest revealed a side of itself few ever witness. And fewer survive unchanged. So if you're ready to walk into the darkness to hear what the forest holds in its quiet, breathless corners, stay close. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to The Other. Because once you enter the darker side of reality, these is always another story waiting. I've been on dozens of missing person calls. Some end well, most don't, and a few leave something behind in you, something that stays no matter how many nights pass. The Tongass is beautiful, but it's merciless. Too big, too quiet, too old. When it decides to keep someone, it does. On May 18, 2009, the forest kept someone, and it tried to show me where it put him. We received the call around 7 a.m. A man, mid-50s, experienced hiker, hadn't returned to camp overnight. Not uncommon. People get turned around, panic, wander. But his wife said he carried a small hand-crank radio everywhere. "If you hear the weather broadcast," she said, "that's him." I wish it had been that simple. By noon, I was hiking deeper than I usually went. Old-growth spruce towering over me, thick moss swallowing each step, the air cold enough to sting. My partner, Lewis, walked beside me, scanning the ground for signs. Broken twigs, drag marks, clothing scraps. But the forest looked untouched. Too untouched. Every search has certain rhythms. Distant birds, the occasional squirrel darting behind you, the rustle of wind in the canopy. But that day, the forest was dead silent. No sound except our boots and our radios, occasionally crackling. After an hour, Lewis stopped suddenly and raised a hand. "You hear that?" he whispered. At first I thought it was just wind. Then I heard it clearly. A faint crackle drifting between the trees. Mechanical, rhythmic. A radio. "It's him," I said. Relief bloomed in my chest. We followed the sound. But something felt off right away. The signal wasn't stable. It moved. Not like someone adjusting their position. More like someone walking steadily away from us. Every time we got close, it shifted. Closer, then deeper, then left, then right, like it was circling us. Lewis frowned. He's either on the move or someone's playing games. But the sound wasn't footsteps or voices. Just the same calm weather report, repeating through static. Cloud ceiling, 5,500. Advisory in effect. We picked up our pace. After another 10 minutes, the sound grew louder, clearer, like it was just beyond the next rise. We climbed the hill quickly, breath puffing in white bursts. At the top was a clearing. Empty, perfectly still. A single cedar stump stood in the center, blackened by age. The radio sound was loud now. Too loud, like it was right there with us. Lewis scanned the area. "Where the hell is he? I don't see anything." I walked toward the stump. The radio noise grew louder, and louder, and louder, until I realized something horrifying. The sound wasn't around the stump. It was inside it. A hollowed cedar trunk, carved open decades earlier by rot or lightning, dark as a well. I leaned in. The radio broadcast played clearly, as though an invisible speaker sat just beyond reach. I felt my breath hitch. "You think he dropped it in there?" Lewis shook his head. "No way it would echo like that." I knelt and shined my flashlight into the hollow. Pitch black. No shine of plastic, no reflection of metal, just darkness so deep it felt thick. Then the broadcast cut out. Static swallowed everything, and beneath the static came a voice. A man's voice, wavering, weak, terrified. "Help!" I jerked backward. "Lewis, someone's in there!" We both leaned closer. The static rumbled again, then, "Help me." It was him, the missing hiker. There was no mistaking the panic in his voice, but something about it felt wrong. It didn't sound like it was coming from a device. It sounded like it was coming from behind something, like a man calling through a wall or through thick liquid. Lewis crouched. "Sir, we hear you. Can you move toward the opening?" There was a pause, then a whisper. It took my face. I felt my stomach turn over. Lewis's eyes widened. What did he say? Before I could answer, something shifted inside the hollow. A soft, wet sound, like a large animal peeling itself off damp ground. Then, slowly, something white pressed against the inner bark. At first I thought it was skin, but it looked wrong. Too smooth, too pale, stretched tight without pores or wrinkles. The white mass twitched. I scrambled away so fast I nearly tripped. Lewis swore under his breath, stumbling backward. The radio static grew louder, warping, bending, rising into something that almost sounded like breathing. Deep, slow, hungry. We backed toward the tree line. The white shape inside the stump rose slightly, as if something was pushing itself upward, inch by inch. Lewis grabbed my arm. "We're leaving. Now." We ran. Branches whipped at our faces. Moss sucked at our boots. The static faded behind us, muffled by distance, but never disappearing entirely, like something was crawling after us with a radio pressed to its chest. We reached the main trail in record time, both of us shaking. I radioed base, voice cracking as I tried to explain what we'd heard, what we'd seen. A full team went back with us. But when we returned to the stump, the forest felt normal again. Birds chirping, wind rustling the canopy. Inside the hollow, nothing. No static, no voice, no white shape. Just deep scratch marks carved into the inner bark. Long, narrow grooves like fingernails dragged in desperation. We never found the hiker, but 2 weeks later, a fisherman discovered his backpack 17 miles away. Inside was his radio, still working, still tuned to the same frequency. And when they turned it on, the first sound that came out was a whisper beneath the static. "Help me." I quit search and rescue after that, because now I know the truth. The forest doesn't always hide people. Sometimes it keeps them, and sometimes it tries to show you why. People think camping alone is peaceful. They imagine quiet nights, crackling firewood, stars hanging low enough to touch. And normally, they're right. But the night of April 11th, 2021, Croatan felt wrong from the moment I stepped out of my truck. There's a heaviness in that forest that you don't understand until you're surrounded by it. The way the pines crowd together like they're whispering. The way everything goes dark faster than it should. I'd camped there a dozen times before, always for the solitude, the reset. I never once felt unsafe. But that night, the woods felt occupied. I hiked in maybe 2 miles to my usual spot. A clearing by a cluster of long-leaf pines with a fallen log I always used as a bench. The forest was unusually quiet, even for dusk. No crickets yet, no distant frogs from the marsh. Just stillness thick enough to settle on your skin. I set up camp, started a small fire, cooked some canned chili, and tried to convince myself nothing was wrong. By 9:30 p.m., the woods had turned pitch black. The fire was the only circle of light in a dome of darkness. I was sitting on my log, poking at the embers when I heard it. Footsteps. Not heavy. Not animal-like. Human. Slow, deliberate footfalls on pine needles. Crack, crunch, crack. I froze, listening. They stopped. I turned off my headlamp, letting the fire be my only light. If someone was out there, shining a beam into the dark would just make me blind to everything outside it. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded too loud, too forced. No answer. Just the soft hiss of the fire and the silence of the forest absorbing my words. Then the footsteps started again, closer this time. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Coming from the tree line directly behind me. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, but didn't turn it on. I reached for the hatchet I keep in my belt. My hand trembled. Crunch. The footsteps stopped just outside the reach of the fire's glow. "Who's there?" I said. Still nothing. For a few seconds, I just stared into the darkness between the pines. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt watched. Not the way you feel when an animal is staring at you. This felt intentional, intelligent, patient. My breath came out shaky. I forced myself to take one step toward the tree line. That's when he stepped into view. A man. At least I think it was a man. Tall, thin, clothes dark enough to be the part of the forest. He stood just at the edge of the firelight, where his face should have been visible. But I couldn't see it. It wasn't that it was covered. It was like the darkness bent around his head, swallowing it deeper than the rest of the woods. As if the shadows clung to him, refused to let go. "Are you lost?" I asked, trying to sound steady. His head tilted, one slow, unnatural angle, like a dog trying to understand a trick. He didn't speak. Then he lifted one arm and pointed behind me, toward my campfire. The movement was stiff, deliberate, almost puppet-like. "Look," he whispered. It wasn't a voice. It was breath forced into shape, a scraping sound that seemed to drag through the trees. Against every instinct screaming at me not to, I turned, and the fire wasn't right. Flames bent sideways as though wind pushed them. But there was no wind. The smoke twisted upward, forming thin spirals that drifted far too slowly, like they were being pulled by something above the canopy. The shadows thrown by the fire stretched long across the forest floor. Too long. They extended in unnatural shapes like fingers reaching toward me. And one shadow, a tall, thin one, didn't match anything near the fire. When I spun back around, the man had moved closer. Much closer. He was standing only a few feet away now, as silent as a dropped leaf. His face was still swallowed by darkness, but I saw something below his chin, a faint shine, like wet skin stretching where a mouth might be. I stumbled back, kicked over my log seat, and pointed my flashlight at him. When I clicked it on, the beam didn't hit him. It bent around him, like light refused to touch him. He lifted his arm again, this time pointing not at the fire but at me, and he whispered, "You brought it here." Cold ran up my spine so fast I felt sick. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, stepping away slowly. Behind me, the fire crackled, but way too loudly, like someone had thrown gasoline into it. The flames roared, illuminating the clearing for a split second. And in that split second, the man's face became visible. There were no features, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just smooth skin, except for a thin slit where a mouth might form, and the slit moved, like something behind it was trying to press outward. I ran. I grabbed my pack, didn't care what spilled out, and sprinted into the trees. Branches whipped my arms. Roots nearly took me down. My lungs burned with cold night air. I didn't dare look back. But I heard him, not walking, following. The sound of movement behind me wasn't footsteps anymore. It was closer, heavier, like something dragging itself through the forest at impossible speed. A wet, rhythmic pull. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. I broke out of the woods near the trailhead, breathless, barely able to think. I reached my truck, fumbled the keys, dropped them, cursed, finally got inside and slammed the doors. The forest edge was still, silent. Then something moved between the pines. A tall, dark silhouette, just standing there, just watching. When I turned on the headlights, the figure stepped backward, not walking, but sliding into the dark like it was melting into the trees. I drove away without looking back again. It's been 2 years. I don't camp alone anymore. Hell, I barely sleep with my windows open. Because sometimes, late at night, when the room is quiet, I hear that same whisper from the tree line. tucked somewhere in memory or madness. You brought it here, and sometimes I wake to ashes on my windowsill, like someone stood outside, warming their hands by a fire only I could see. I've walked the Black Forest since I was a boy. My father was a forester, his father before him, and I grew up knowing every ridge, every logging road, every creek that froze first in winter. Nothing in those woods ever frightened me. Not until 1996. People think of the Black Forest as mystical, even romantic. But there are places deep inside it where the trees grow too close together, where the canopy swallows the light, where the moss seems thick enough to drown in. Places even experienced hikers avoid. That morning, November 7th, I wasn't planning to go anywhere unusual. I had simply been called to investigate some strange animal noises near an old hunting path. A farmer had heard something screaming during the night. Not a deer, not a boar. Something wrong, he said. I laughed it off. City people always thought the forest was full of monsters. I wasn't laughing later. The trail was silent as I walked. Thick fog clung between the trunks. Every footstep felt swallowed, softened by wet leaves. I kept listening for any sign of an animal. Breathing, branches breaking, paw prints. But there was nothing, not even birds. Usually that meant a predator nearby, but the silence felt heavier than that. Like the whole forest was holding back, hiding. After an hour, I reached an old oak I'd known since childhood. Twisted, blackened by lightning decades earlier. We always called it the Split King because the trunk had opened at the base like a mouth, forming a large hollow, maybe a meter deep. I used to dare other kids to stick their heads inside. This time, I didn't go near it. Because as I approached, I saw something I had never expected in a forest that deep. A girl, maybe 12, sitting inside the hollow of the tree, her knees drawn up, hands clasped tight around her shins. Brown hair tangled and matted with leaves. I froze. Fräulein, bist du verletzt? Miss, are you hurt? No answer. I stepped closer, my boots barely making a sound in the damp soil. Do you need help? Her head jerked upward, not slowly, not naturally. It snapped up like a puppet pulled by a string. And I saw her face, eyes wide, not blinking, so pale they were almost white. Skin gray, cold-looking, stretched tight across sharp cheekbones. Dirt streaked across her mouth. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm though my heart was pounding. Her lips trembled. Then she whispered, "It won't let me out." The sound was thin and breathless, like it hadn't been used in days. I looked around. The trees were still. Nothing moved. No predator. No threat. Except the fear radiating off her like cold air. "What won't let you out?" I asked. Her eyes drifted upward, toward the branches above us, then slid back down toward the dark inside of the hollow. The thing in the tree. I felt a sudden, uncomfortable pressure in my chest, like the forest had pressed closer. I crouched down slowly, trying to keep her calm. "Let's get you home, all right? Come out." She didn't move. She just stared at me with those pale, glassy eyes. Then she spoke in a whisper so soft I leaned in to hear it. "You can't see it yet." A cold wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves behind me. Not much, just enough for me to instinctively turn around. When I looked back at the hollow, she had shifted, but not by moving. She was deeper inside the tree, pressed back into the darkness, like something had pulled her. "Fräulein!" I grabbed the edge of the bark and reached inside, but she recoiled. Her face twisted, eyes wide with terror. "Don't touch it. It hates when you touch it." "Touch what?" I demanded. Her gaze drifted past my shoulder. Something cracked behind me. A branch. Heavy. I spun around. Nothing, just fog, endless rows of dark trees, no movement. But the forest felt different, like it was watching. I turned back to the hollow. She was gone. I shoved my arm inside, feeling only damp, cold emptiness. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it in. The hollow didn't look right. It seemed deeper, far deeper than a tree that size should have allowed. The light dissolved after a meter, swallowed by blackness that felt almost liquid. Then I heard breathing. Not mine, not human. Slow, wet, coming from deep inside the tree. I staggered back, nearly slipping on the wet leaves. The breathing grew louder, like something was crawling upward through a narrow tunnel. I didn't stay to see what it was. I backed away, keeping the hollow in sight, rifle raised even though I didn't know what I expected to shoot. Then the breathing stopped. Silence. I thought for a moment it had been my imagination, until I heard a voice behind me. "Don't leave me." I turned so fast I nearly fell. The girl stood about 10 meters away, half hidden behind a pine tree. Her expression blank, her posture stiff. I lifted a hand, terrified but trying not to show it. "How did you—" She stepped out from behind the tree, and I realized her feet weren't touching the ground. She hovered barely an inch above the soil. Her hair hung downward unnaturally, as if gravity pulled a different direction inside her body. She tilted her head, and her voice came out wrong, deeper than a child's, cracked and layered. "You shouldn't be here." That was all I needed. I turned and ran. Branches whipped against my face. Roots caught my boots. More than once, I felt something brush the back of my jacket. Soft, like fingertips dragging just behind me. I didn't stop until the fog thinned, and I saw the faint outline of a farmhouse through the trees. When I finally looked back, the forest edge was still. Nothing followed, but I could still hear the breathing. In my memory. In nightmares. Sometimes even when I'm awake, walking through quieter parts of the woods. I reported the girl to the authorities. They searched for days, found nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no signs anyone had ever been in that hollow. But I know what I saw. And the worst part? The tree. The Split King was struck by lightning again 2 months later. Split clean in half. Burned from the inside out. When the firefighters doused it and opened the charred hollow, they found grooves carved into the wood. Small grooves. Finger-sized. As if something inside had tried desperately to climb out. I haven't walked that part of the forest since. Because some things in the Black Forest aren't myths. They're hungry, and they remember who saw them. People joke about seeing strange things in the forest all the time. Shadows, odd footprints, weird noises. All the usual stories you laugh about later over a fire and a beer. But what I saw that morning in the bitter roots, I don't laugh about it. I don't talk about it. Not unless someone asks me straight to my face and promises they won't think I'm crazy. Because I know what I saw. And I know it saw me too. It was early, around 6 a.m., the kind of cold where your breath comes out in little white ghosts. I'd parked my truck near an old trail I'd used for years. A ridgeline that cuts through the pines and usually brings elk down toward the open meadows. That morning, the woods felt wrong from the moment I stepped out. It wasn't the weather or the darkness, and it was the silence. Total, complete silence. No birds, no crunch of small animals in the underbrush. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. But I chalked it up to early fall and started hiking anyway. After maybe an hour, I stopped to drink some water and check for tracks. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Footprints. Human footprints. Bare ones. Perfectly shaped, toes splayed, heel deep. They looked like they belonged to a teenager or maybe a small adult, but the indentations were too deep, like whoever made them weighed twice as much as they should have. And they started out of nowhere. Literally. Just appeared in the soft earth beside a pine tree, walked a short distance, and ended abruptly at the trunk of another tree like the person had walked into it. I knelt down, studying them. I even brushed the earth with my fingers, trying to figure out if someone was messing with me. But the soil was wet and compacted in a way that only real weight could have made. Then I heard it. Branches snapping somewhere deeper in the trees. Not just snapping, breaking, like something tall was pushing through. I stood up fast, rifle in hand. "Hello," I called out. No answer. The breaking branches continued. Slow. Steady. Coming closer. I raised my rifle and stepped around a cluster of pines, scanning the woods. That's when I saw movement. Pale skin weaving between the shadows. My first thought was that it was a person, maybe lost or hurt. But the shape was wrong. Too tall, limbs too long. And the way it moved. It didn't walk. It folded forward with each step, like its knees bent backward. Short, quick strides that made no sound except for the branches brushing against it. It stopped. I held my breath. It stood between two trees, half hidden in shadow. Pale, almost white skin. No clothes. Arms. Too thin. And where its head should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth skin, like a torso extended straight upward with no neck, no face, no features. Then something opened. Not on its shoulders, but in the center of its chest. A mouth. Vertical. Long. Smooth, wet skin peeling back like a slit, being slowly pulled apart. Inside was black. Not teeth. Not tongue. Just a darkness that felt alive, like it was waiting to swallow something. A sound came from it. A hiss. A tremor. Almost like breathing, but not human. I froze. My legs locked. My brain screamed, run, but every part of me was paralyzed by the sight of that thing. It turned toward me without turning any sort of head. Just a shift of its torso. The mouth twitched, opening a little wider, and then it moved. Not fast, not slow. Just directly toward me, like it was curious. I aimed my rifle, but my hands shook so badly I couldn't keep the sight steady. I wanted to shout, to scare it, to make noise, but no sound left my throat. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat and the faint, wet sound of that slit mouth opening and closing. I took one step back. The thing stopped. It tilted, or leaned, almost like a creature smelling the air, even though it had no nose. Then the forest changed. Behind the thing, deeper between the trees, something else moved. Several somethings. Pale shapes shifting behind the pines, tall and thin. More than one, more than two. They weren't walking toward me. They were watching. Waiting. That snapped me out of it. I turned and ran. I ran so hard my lungs burned. Branches slashed my arms and my boots slipped on loose needles. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe properly until I saw the glint of my truck through the trees. I slammed the door, locked it, started the engine with shaking hands. But when I glanced at the driver's side window, my heart stopped. There were wet footprints on the door. Small, bare ones. Pressed against the cold metal like something had been standing there, watching me scramble for the keys. Something had followed me. I sped out of the forest road so fast I almost hit a ditch. I didn't stop until I reached the main highway. Once I pulled over and got out to check the truck, the footprints were already drying, fading with the autumn air. But stuck beneath the wiper blade was a pine needle, blackened, wet, bent like something heavy had pressed on it. That was nearly 10 years ago. I still hunt, but never alone. Never in that part of the forest. Never near that ridge. And sometimes, when I walk through the woods and the wind dies down all at once, I swear I hear branches breaking behind me, slow, steady, coming closer, the same way they did that morning. Before I realized the forest wasn't silent. It was listening. And something in it remembered me.